Let's begin our quiet journey together, drifting gently into the forgotten corners of the human mind, into the places that most people never dare to look, into the quiet, shadowy spaces that exist not only in old myths or hidden forests, but deep within ourselves. For long ago, one of the great explorers of the human mind, a man named Carl Jung, offered us a map, not of physical lands or ancient cities, but of our inner world, of the landscapes hidden beneath our daily thoughts, beneath the stories we tell ourselves, and at the center of this inner landscape, tucked quietly out of sight, he spoke of something called the shadow self, a hidden part of every human being that waits in silence, unnoticed yet always there, following us like a faint echo or a quiet reflection we avoid meeting in the mirror. And tonight, as the world outside grows quieter, as the soft hum of life slows down, we will gently explore what this shadow is, why it exists, and how it quietly shapes us from the inside without most of us even noticing. The idea of the shadow self isn't new. In fact, it weaves itself through ancient stories, myths, and old whispers from long-forgotten cultures. For in nearly every tradition, there has always been talk of the light and the dark within people, the good we show the world, and the other side, the hidden side, the one we keep tucked away, afraid it might reveal itself when we least expect it. Yet Carl Jung, with his quiet patience and deep curiosity, gave this hidden side a name. He called it the shadow, and not because it is evil, but because it lives in the dark, just beyond the reach of our awareness. Like the way a shadow follows us in the sunlight, never leaving, never speaking, yet always present. Jung believed that each of us carries within us parts of ourselves that we have rejected, forgotten, or pushed aside. Maybe it is anger we were taught not to feel, or sadness we buried long ago, or fears we were too proud to admit, or even quiet desires that never fit the neat boxes society offered us. And all of these hidden parts, these quiet fragments of our being, they don't disappear when we deny them. They don't simply vanish into thin air. Instead, they gather quietly, forming the shadow, the hidden self that patiently waits beneath the surface of our daily life. It's easy to pretend the shadow isn't there. Most people do, after all. The world teaches us to smile, to be kind, to succeed, to appear in control, but beneath that surface, there are forgotten corners of ourselves that still exist, quietly shaping our thoughts, our choices, and our reactions, even when we think we are fully aware. And Jung believed that if we never turn to face this hidden part, if we never take the quiet time to explore it, the shadow doesn't disappear. Instead, it grows stronger in the dark, influencing our lives in ways we barely understand. But don't worry, this isn't a scary journey. There's no rush, no need to force anything to the surface. Exploring the shadow isn't about harsh confrontations. It's more like gently holding a lantern in a dark forest, watching as the soft light reveals forgotten trees, old paths, and quiet spaces we had ignored. And as we drift further into this story, you'll start to see that the shadow isn't an enemy. It's not something to fear, but rather, it is a part of us that, when understood, brings balance, wholeness, and a deeper peace. Because to truly know ourselves, we must understand not only the parts we proudly show the world, but also the quiet corners we hide away. As we continue, imagine now, not just your thoughts, but your entire self as a vast landscape. Picture mountains of memory, rivers of emotion, valleys filled with old stories, and somewhere in this quiet landscape, there are caves, hidden pathways, and dark forests that few ever visit. These are the places where the shadow lives not as a monster lurking in the dark, but as the quiet echo of everything you've pushed away. The emotions unspoken, the fears avoided, the memories too. Painful to face, and yet they remain part of you, woven into the fabric of your being, waiting not for punishment, but for recognition. And Jung taught that when we ignore these hidden parts, they don't disappear. They can spill out into our lives in unexpected ways. Maybe in moments of sudden anger that feel out of character, or in quiet patterns of self-sabotage, or in the way we judge others harshly for traits we secretly carry ourselves. And so understanding the shadow is not about becoming perfect, it is about becoming whole, gently bringing together all the forgotten pieces so that we no longer have to live divided within ourselves. So as you lay back, listening quietly, imagine for a moment what it would be like to meet your shadow. Not as a terrifying figure, but as a forgotten friend, carrying the old pieces of you that were left behind, the parts that only want to be seen, understood, and gently welcomed home. Because when we finally look at the shadow with compassion, we start to heal, not by fighting ourselves, but by embracing all that we are. And in that quiet space, beyond judgment, beyond fear, we discover the true beginning of self-awareness, of healing, and of peace. As we drift a little deeper into this quiet exploration, let's pause for a moment to understand how the shadow forms in the first place. Because the shadow self isn't born from something outside of us, it is not placed upon us by fate or by other people. It grows quietly within our own experience, often beginning when we are very young, when the world first teaches us what is acceptable and what is not, when we start to learn which parts of ourselves bring approval, love, and belonging, and which parts are met with disapproval, rejection, or quiet silence, and without even realizing it, we begin to tuck away the parts that seem unwanted. Maybe you remember moments like that from your own life, moments when you were told not to cry, to be strong, to hide your fears, moments when your curiosity or wildness or sensitivity were met with frowns or harsh words, so you tucked those parts away, believing they didn't belong, and little by little, those hidden pieces drifted into the quiet corners of your mind, gathering in the shadow, waiting silently for the day when you might finally turn and look at them with kindness. It's not anyone's fault, really. This is how society works, how families try to protect us, how communities create rules. And so we adapt, learning to show only what feels safe, building a version of ourselves that fits in. But beneath that version, the shadow grows quietly, carrying the forgotten emotions, the buried memories, the rejected parts of our true self. And the longer we go without acknowledging it, the more likely it is to influence our lives from behind the scenes. Carl Jung believed that the shadow contains not only what we reject, but also incredible potential, hidden gifts, buried creativity, forgotten strength, and deep understanding, because sometimes in trying to be acceptable to the world, we hide away not only our pain, but also our power. And so the shadow becomes not just a place of fear, but a quiet vault holding the lost treasures of our soul. Imagine for a moment walking through an old, forgotten house, the windows covered in dust, the floors creaking softly beneath your feet, and as you explore, you find locked rooms, unopened doors. And when you finally find the courage to turn the key, you discover not monsters, but old, forgotten photographs, letters, memories, and beautiful objects that had been hidden away, waiting patiently to be remembered. This is what it feels like to meet the shadow self. Not a frightening confrontation, but a quiet homecoming to parts of you that deserve to be seen. But it takes time, patience, and gentle curiosity, because the shadow doesn't reveal itself under pressure or in moments of harsh self-criticism. It opens when we slow down, when we listen, when we allow ourselves to feel without judgment, and in those moments, we begin to see ourselves not as broken, but as whole. Complex beings carrying both light and shadow, both joy and sorrow, both pride and vulnerability, and that is the beauty of being human. Jung often spoke of the process of individuation, a quiet, lifelong journey of becoming whole, of integrating all the parts of ourselves, both the ones we proudly show the world and the ones we hide in the shadows. And it is through this process that we move closer to authenticity, to peace, to self-understanding, and ultimately to a deeper connection with others. Because the more we understand our own shadow, the less likely we are to project it onto the world around us. You see, projection is what happens when we deny the shadow within and instead see it reflected in others. We might judge someone for their anger, when in truth we are hiding our own. We might feel threatened by someone's confidence, when deep down we've buried our own. And this is how misunderstanding and conflict quietly grow, not from the actions of others, but from the parts of ourselves we refuse to face. But as we gently bring awareness to these hidden parts, the world softens. We begin to see others with more compassion, understanding that they too carry shadows of their own, quietly shaping their choices, their fears, their struggles, and in this shared understanding there is less judgment, less division, and more space for connection, for healing, and for peace. So as you relax, drifting deeper into this quiet reflection, imagine your shadow not as an enemy, but as a forgotten companion. A quiet guide carrying the keys to understanding your fears, your desires, your hidden strengths, and your true self, because when we walk with the shadow, rather than run from it. We find not only wholeness but freedom, the freedom to be all that we are, without fear, without hiding, and without shame. And so the quiet journey continues, not with loud answers or quick solutions, but with gentle curiosity, soft awareness, and the understanding that the shadow is not the end of the story, but the beginning of truly knowing ourselves. As we drift even further into this quiet reflection, let's imagine for a moment how the shadow shows itself in daily life, not with loud footsteps or dramatic moments, but quietly, softly, in ways that often go unnoticed. Because the shadow doesn't always arrive with a roar. Sometimes it appears as a quiet discomfort when someone speaks a truth we are not ready to hear. Sometimes it shows itself in the jealousy that rises unexpectedly when we see someone living freely, expressing parts of themselves that we have hidden away, and sometimes the shadow whispers to us in moments of self-sabotage when we avoid opportunities, push people away, or hold ourselves back, not because we cannot succeed, but because a hidden part of us believes we are unworthy, unseen, or not enough. These quiet moments, though uncomfortable, are not punishments. They are gentle invitations from the shadow, subtle reminders that there are still hidden parts of ourselves longing to be seen, acknowledged, and welcomed home, because the truth is, we cannot run from our shadow. It walks with us wherever we go, shaping our relationships, our choices, our reactions, and even the way we see the world. Carl Jung often spoke of how facing the shadow is an act of courage, but not the loud heroic, courage of grand gestures, rather the quiet, steady courage of looking inward, of sitting with our discomfort, of exploring the forgotten corners of the self with curiosity rather than fear, because only when we turn toward the shadow instead of away from it can we begin to understand its purpose, its message, and its quiet role in our growth. It's important to remember that the shadow is not inherently negative, though it carries the parts of us that feel uncomfortable. It also carries the potential for great healing for hidden strength, for deeper creativity, and for a more authentic life. Imagine a garden overgrown and wild, hidden behind old stone walls and within that forgotten space. Despite the tangled vines and shadows, grow the most beautiful, untamed flowers, their colors hidden from the world, their beauty untouched by judgment. This is what lives within the shadow, not only fear and pain, but the forgotten beauty and strength of our whole self. But to reach that hidden garden, we must be gentle, patient, and willing to explore without judgment, because the moment we meet our shadow with harshness or rejection, it retreats deeper into the dark. But when we approach with softness, with understanding, the shadow begins to reveal itself, little by little, like old memories resurfacing, like forgotten dreams returning to our awareness. Jung believed that we all carry both light and shadow, both conscious awareness and hidden parts, and that true self-understanding comes not from choosing one over the other, but from gently integrating both, weaving together the visible and the hidden, the known and the unknown into a whole, complex, and beautifully imperfect self. And so, the journey of meeting the shadow is not about fixing ourselves, but about seeing ourselves more clearly, about understanding that even the parts we hide carry meaning, that even our fears and insecurities hold lessons, that even our anger or sadness or jealousy are not enemies, but quiet signals from within, asking us to listen, to slow down, to understand. As we rest here in this quiet space of reflection, imagine the shadow as a quiet companion walking beside you, not chasing you, not haunting you, but simply existing, holding the forgotten parts of your story, carrying the lost pieces of your emotions, your memories, your dreams, waiting for the moment when you feel ready to turn, to look, to listen, and to welcome them home. Because in doing so, we don't lose ourselves, we reclaim ourselves, we take back the parts that were hidden, the pieces that were silenced, and we become little by little more whole, more real, more at peace with the beautiful complexity of being human. And so this quiet journey continues, not toward perfection, but toward understanding, not toward eliminating the shadow, but toward embracing it. And as you drift deeper into this peaceful exploration, you may begin to sense that even within the shadows, there is softness, there is beauty, and there is light. Now, as we drift quietly along this gentle path of reflection, let's begin to understand how the shadow is not only a part of us as individuals, but also how it shapes entire communities, societies, and even history itself. Because just as each person carries their own shadow within, so too do groups, cultures, and nations carry collective shadows, hidden truths, unspoken histories, forgotten mistakes, and rejected parts of their identity. And Carl Jung understood that what exists within one human heart often reflects outward, spreading quietly across the world. Imagine for a moment not just your own life, but the stories of nations, of cultures, of humanity as a whole, and you will see how often the shadow appears, not in whispers of personal fear or forgotten emotions, but in the way societies reject certain groups, silence certain voices, hide certain histories, or deny uncomfortable truths. And when these shadows remain hidden, they grow stronger, shaping our world through division, misunderstanding, and conflict. But just as facing our personal shadow brings healing, facing the collective shadow brings awareness, understanding, and the possibility of change. And though it may feel overwhelming to imagine the shadows of an entire society, the journey always begins quietly, gently within ourselves, because every time one person looks inward, acknowledges their own hidden fears, insecurities, and forgotten dreams, they contribute to a world that is a little more conscious, a little more compassionate, and a little more whole. Jung believed that true peace both within and beyond ourselves is only possible when we stop denying the shadow and instead learn to understand it, because the parts we reject, whether within ourselves or within society, never truly disappear. They hide, they wait, and they influence us in ways we cannot always see until we find the quiet courage to look. And so, as you continue to relax, breathing softly, drifting deeper into this space of reflection, you might begin to sense that exploring the shadow, though it may seem heavy at first, is in truth a gentle act of love, of self-respect, and of quiet liberation, because to deny any part of ourselves is to remain divided, but to accept even the hidden, forgotten parts is to move toward wholeness. The shadow you see is not an enemy to be defeated, but a quiet teacher showing us where we are still wounded, where we are still hiding, and where we still have the potential to grow. It reminds us that we are not only the polished, smiling versions of ourselves that the world sees, but also the complex, vulnerable, emotional beings that live quietly beneath the surface. And when we accept this, truly accept this, we create space for self-forgiveness, for patience, for growth, and for deeper connection with others. Because the more we understand our own shadow, the more compassion we hold for the shadows others carry, and in that space of shared understanding, judgment begins to soften, walls begin to lower, and the quiet possibility of peace begins to grow. So, as you rest here, listening softly, drifting through these gentle thoughts, imagine a world where each person, each community, and each society takes a moment to pause, to look inward, to acknowledge not only their strengths and successes, but also their fears, their forgotten histories, their hidden pain, because only then can healing truly begin, not through force, but through quiet understanding, through gentle awareness, and through the courage to see the whole, beautiful, complex truth of what it means to be human. And so our journey with the shadow continues not toward fear, but toward understanding, not toward perfection, but toward wholeness. And as you drift deeper into this quiet space, you may begin to sense that even in the hidden corners of the self, there is light, there is wisdom, and there is peace waiting patiently, always to be discovered. Now, as we drift quietly along this gentle path of reflection, let's begin to understand how the shadow is not only a part of us as individuals, but also how it shapes entire communities, societies, and even history itself, because just as each person carries their own shadow within, so too do groups, cultures, and nations carry collective shadows, hidden truths, unspoken histories, forgotten mistakes, and rejected parts of their identity. And Carl Jung understood that what exists within one human heart often reflects outward, spreading quietly across the world. Imagine for a moment not just your own life, but the stories of nations, of cultures, of humanity as a whole, and you will see how often the shadow appears, not in whispers of personal fear or forgotten emotions, but in the way societies reject certain groups, silence certain voices, hide certain histories, or deny uncomfortable truths. And when these shadows remain hidden, they grow stronger, shaping our world through division, misunderstanding, and conflict. But just as facing our personal shadow brings healing, Facing the collective shadow brings awareness, understanding, and the possibility of change. And though it may feel overwhelming to imagine the shadows of an entire society, the journey always begins quietly, gently within ourselves, because every time one person looks inward, acknowledges their own hidden fears, insecurities, and forgotten dreams, they contribute to a world that is a little more conscious, a little more compassionate, and a little more whole. Jung believed that true peace, both within and beyond ourselves, is only possible when we stop denying the shadow and instead learn to understand it, because the parts we reject, whether within ourselves or within society, never truly disappear. They hide, they wait, and they influence us in ways we cannot always see until we find the quiet courage to look. And so, as you continue to relax, breathing softly, drifting deeper into this space of reflection, you might begin to sense that exploring the shadow, though it may seem heavy at first, is in truth a gentle act of love, of self-respect, and of quiet liberation, because to deny any part of ourselves is to remain divided, but to accept even the hidden, forgotten parts is to move toward wholeness. The shadow, you see, is not an enemy to be defeated, but a quiet teacher, showing us where we are still wounded, where we are still hiding, and where we still have the potential to grow. It reminds us that we are not only the polished, smiling versions of ourselves that the world sees, but also the complex, vulnerable, emotional beings that live quietly beneath the surface. And when we accept this, truly accept this, we create space. Space for self-forgiveness, for patience, for growth, and for deeper connection with others. Because the more we understand our own shadow, the more compassion we hold for the shadows others carry, and in that space of shared understanding, judgment begins to soften walls, begin to lower, and the quiet possibility of peace begins to grow. So, as you rest here, listening softly, drifting through these gentle thoughts, imagine a world where each person, each community, and each society takes a moment to pause, to look inward, to acknowledge not only their strengths and successes, but also their fears, their forgotten histories, their hidden pain, because only then can healing truly begin, not through force, but through quiet understanding, through gentle awareness, and through the courage to see the whole, beautiful, complex truth of what it means to be human. And so our journey with the shadow continues not toward fear, but toward understanding, not toward perfection, but toward wholeness. And as you drift deeper into this quiet space, you may begin to sense that even in the hidden corners of the self, there is light, there is wisdom, and there is peace waiting patiently, always to be discovered. Now, as we drift deeper into this gentle reflection, it is important to remember that the shadow does not only hold discomfort. Pain or forgotten wounds hidden within the shadow are also the parts of us that were once beautiful, powerful, even magical, but were quietly pushed away, often because the world told us they were unacceptable, impractical, or too much to carry. And Jung understood that just as the shadow contains our hidden fears, it also holds the quiet keys to our forgotten gifts. Think back to childhood, to the early years when imagination flowed freely, when curiosity was boundless, when laughter was easy and emotions were raw and unfiltered. It was during these years that many of our hidden gifts first appeared. Sometimes they were met with love, encouragement, and acceptance, but often they were misunderstood, dismissed, or gently discouraged, and so, without realizing it, we tucked them away, hiding not only our vulnerability, but also our creativity, our boldness, our sensitivity, and even our deepest dreams. And so, as the shadow grew quietly beneath the surface, it did not simply hold our fears, but also our forgotten strengths, our silenced dreams, and the quiet whispers of potential that still wait patiently to be rediscovered. And meeting the shadow, then, is not only an act of courage, but also an act of quiet reclamation, gently gathering the lost pieces of ourselves, welcoming them home, and allowing them to breathe again. Imagine now walking through that hidden garden of the self, the place we spoke of earlier, the overgrown, forgotten space beyond the walls of your daily life. And as you push open the old creaking gate, you don't just find tangled vines and shadowy corners, you also find beauty, wildflowers blooming where no one thought to look, old dreams resting quietly beneath the surface, forgotten strengths hidden beneath the leaves. And as you explore, you realize that the shadow is not a wasteland of fear, but a hidden sanctuary filled with everything you once believed you had to leave behind. Carl Jung taught that by integrating these hidden parts, we don't lose control, we gain wholeness. We don't become overwhelmed by darkness. We become illuminated by the full truth of who we are, because a life lived only in the light, only in the acceptable, polished version of ourselves, is a life lived half asleep, missing the depth, the richness, and the quiet magic that comes from embracing all that we carry within. And so, as you breathe softly, resting gently in this space, let go of the belief that your shadow makes you broken or unworthy. Understand instead that the shadow makes you whole, that within the parts you've hidden, there is wisdom, there is strength, and there is quiet beauty waiting to be rediscovered. This journey is not about becoming someone new, it is about remembering who you have always been beneath the layers of fear, expectation, and forgotten stories. You are already whole, already enough, already worthy of peace, love, and quiet belonging. And the shadow, far from being an enemy, is simply the keeper of the forgotten pieces, the silent companion waiting patiently for you to remember. And when you finally turn toward the shadow, when you meet its quiet gaze with curiosity and compassion, you begin to walk not as a divided being hiding parts of yourself away, but as a whole human, complex, beautiful, and fully alive. So, as you drift deeper into this quiet space of reflection, imagine the shadow not as darkness to be feared, but as soil, rich and fertile, where the seeds of forgotten dreams, hidden gifts, and quiet strengths are buried, waiting patiently for the day when you feel ready to tend to them, to water them, and to let them bloom once more. Because this, too, is the gift of the shadow, the quiet reminder that within the hidden parts of ourselves, there is always the possibility of growth, of healing, and of gentle, beautiful transformation. As we float further into this quiet exploration of the self, it becomes clear that understanding the shadow is not about creating division within, but about dissolving the illusion that we are only the polished, acceptable parts the world sees, because the human soul is vast, layered, and ancient in its complexity. And Carl Jung believed that true peace comes not from denying the shadow, but from weaving it gently into the tapestry of who we are, allowing both light and dark, both joy and sorrow, both strength and vulnerability to sit side by side. And there is a quiet relief in this understanding, a soft exhale, because it means you no longer have to strive for impossible perfection. You no longer need to deny your sadness, your fears, your insecurities. You no longer need to hide your imperfections away. Like shameful secrets, instead you can hold them softly, acknowledging that they too are part of the rich, complex story that is your life. Jung often spoke of the ancient symbols and archetypes that live within us, universal patterns of human experience that appear again and again in myths, in dreams, in stories passed down through generations. And the shadow is one of the most enduring of these symbols, present not only in philosophy but also in art, in literature, in the quiet, hidden corners of our collective imagination. We see the shadow reflected in the stories we tell, in the characters who struggle with hidden fears, in the heroes who must face their darkness to find their strength, in the myths where journeys into the underworld reveal wisdom, not destruction. And in all these stories, ancient and modern, the message is the same, that only by facing what is hidden can we truly become whole. And this is not merely a poetic idea, it is a deep psychological truth, because when we avoid the shadow, we fracture ourselves, we create distance within, and that distance grows silently, quietly influencing our choices, our relationships, and even our health. But when we bring gentle awareness to the hidden parts, we close that distance, we soften the separation, and we begin to move through life with more ease, with more understanding, with more peace. Imagine now, not only your own shadow, but the shadows that weave quietly through humanity itself, the forgotten histories, the unspoken wounds, the collective fears that shape cultures, and see that the process of meeting the shadow is not only personal but universal, because every human being, every community, every nation carries hidden parts, and healing begins not through denial, but through gentle acknowledgement, through quiet understanding. And as you drift softly into this thought, let go of the idea that the shadow is a flaw to be corrected. See instead that it is a doorway, a quiet path inward, leading not to fear, but to freedom. because when we reclaim what was hidden, we reclaim our wholeness, and in doing so, we find a deeper peace than the world can often offer. This peace is not loud, it does not arrive with grand declarations, it arrives softly in the quiet moments of reflection, in the patient process of self-awareness, in the simple, beautiful act of saying, I see all of me, I accept all of me, and I walk with all of me, shadow and light together. So as you breathe gently, resting here in this peaceful space, remember that the journey to the shadow is not a battle to be fought. It is a quiet walk home, a soft returning to the parts of yourself that have been waiting patiently, ready to be seen, ready to be held, and ready at last to be embraced. Now, as this gentle journey continues, you may notice how the deeper we go, the more it becomes clear that the shadow is not something separate from us, not an outsider peering in, but simply a quiet reflection of everything we carry within, hidden beneath the surface. Like the roots of an ancient tree that stretch deep beneath the soil, unseen by the world above, yet essential to the strength and balance of the entire being. Carl Jung believed that to truly know ourselves, to live in peace with both our inner and outer world, we must be willing to descend beneath the surface, to wander into the depths of the unconscious, where the shadow quietly resides, not to conquer it, but to listen, to observe, and to understand. And it is in this descent that we discover not only hidden fears, but also hidden truths, forgotten wisdom, and the beautiful complexity that makes us human, because life on the surface, in the daylight of daily routine social masks, and carefully crafted identities, often tells only half the story. And it is in the quiet, in the stillness, in the hidden places, that the other half of the story softly reveals itself. Imagine standing beside a calm, still lake at twilight, the water perfectly still, reflecting the sky above, but as you look closer, you realize there is more beneath the surface. Shadows moving gently beneath the water, shapes shifting quietly in the depths. And those hidden depths, though unseen by the casual observer, are what give the lake its mystery, its life, its quiet power. And so it is with the self. We are not only what we show to the world, we are also the quiet emotions, the hidden memories, the silenced desires, the fears unspoken, and the dreams tucked away. And it is only when we embrace these hidden depths that we begin to live with true awareness, with gentle confidence, with quiet strength. Jung spoke often of the importance of balance, of holding both light and dark, joy and sorrow, strength and vulnerability, because to deny one side of ourselves is to live in imbalance, and imbalance brings suffering, confusion, and quiet unrest. But when we accept the full landscape of who we are, without judgment, without fear, we create space for healing, for understanding, for quiet transformation, and though the journey may take time, though it may require patience and soft courage, it is the most beautiful journey we will ever take, because it is the journey home to ourselves. So, as you rest here, breathing gently, drifting deeper into this space of reflection, allow yourself to imagine that every forgotten part of you, every quiet fear, every hidden dream, every silenced memory, is not a burden, but a piece of the whole, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting to be seen, waiting to be welcomed home. And in doing so, you reclaim not only your shadow, but your peace, your strength, your quiet wholeness, and the beautiful truth that you were never broken, only waiting to be remembered. As we float gently along this river of thought, it becomes clear that meeting the shadow is not an isolated event, but an ongoing, quiet relationship with ourselves. A lifelong unfolding that deepens with each season, with each experience, and with each moment of honest reflection, because the human soul, much like nature itself, is always changing, always growing, and the hidden parts within us shift and evolve as time passes by. Carl Jung understood that the shadow is never fixed, never frozen in place. It is alive, fluid, shaped by the experiences we gather, the choices we make, and the parts of ourselves we choose to acknowledge or to forget. And so, meeting the shadow is not a one-time conversation. It is a gentle, continuous dialogue with the depths of who we are. Some days, the shadow may appear in dreams, quiet images rising from the unconscious, carrying symbols and messages hidden beneath the language of the waking world. Other times, it may reveal itself in unexpected emotions, moments of frustration, jealousy, or fear that feel unfamiliar, yet offer quiet clues to the hidden parts still asking for our attention. And there are times when the shadow shows itself through the people around us, through the reflections we see in others, especially those who trigger us, frustrate us, or stir deep reactions within us, because often the traits we reject in others mirror the traits we have hidden within ourselves, tucked away in the quiet corners of the shadow. But this too is a gift, because life in its quiet wisdom offers constant opportunities to see ourselves more clearly, to turn toward the hidden places with compassion, and to gently reclaim the parts of our being we thought were lost. Imagine again walking through the hidden landscape of your mind, the forest, the quiet lakes, the forgotten gardens overgrown with time, and each time you return, the landscape feels a little more familiar, a little less intimidating, because with each visit you understand a little more, you accept a little more, and you grow a little closer to the beautiful wholeness that lives within you. And though the shadow may feel heavy at times, it is never stronger than the light within you, because true light is not the absence of shadow, but the quiet courage to hold both, to walk through the dark forests of the self, carrying the lantern of awareness, and to discover that even within the shadows there is beauty, there is growth, and there is peace. Jung taught that wholeness is not about perfection, it is about embracing complexity, about living with the gentle awareness that we are both light and dark, both known and unknown, both strength and vulnerability, and that within this complexity lies the quiet magic of being human. And so, as you breathe softly, resting in this peaceful reflection, remind yourself that the journey to the shadow is not a destination to be reached, but a relationship to be nurtured, a quiet unfolding of self-awareness that deepens gently, softly, with time, with patience, and with love. And as this gentle journey continues, know that you are not alone in this exploration. Every human carries a shadow, every soul holds hidden parts, and the more we accept this within ourselves, the more compassion we hold for the hidden parts in others, creating a world not of judgment, but of quiet understanding, of shared humanity and of gentle peace. Now, as we drift even further into this soft, reflective space, you may begin to notice that meeting the shadow is not only about uncovering hidden fears or forgotten wounds, but also about understanding the quiet stories we tell ourselves, the silent beliefs that shape the way we walk through the world, because woven gently into the shadow are the narratives we've carried for years, often without even realizing it's stories that whisper, "I'm not enough, I must hide this part of me, I must be perfect to be loved." And these quiet hidden beliefs create a lens through which we see ourselves and the world around us. Carl Jung understood that these stories do not appear by accident, they form slowly over time, shaped by childhood experiences, societal expectations, quiet moments of rejection or misunderstanding. And the longer they remain hidden, the more they shape our lives without our awareness. But when we begin to meet the shadow, we also begin to unravel these old stories, to question them gently, to ask ourselves if they are true, and to write new, softer, more compassionate stories in their place. And there is no need to rush this process. Just as a river shapes the land slowly over time, so too does self-awareness deepen, gently, patiently, moment by moment, and as we bring curiosity to the hidden stories within us. We loosen their grip, we soften their edges, and we create space for new understanding to grow. Perhaps the shadow carries the belief that vulnerability is weakness, planted long ago, in moments when your softness was misunderstood, or maybe it carries the quiet fear that your true self is too much or not enough, shaped by forgotten words, by glances, by experiences that left their mark. And yet, when we bring these hidden beliefs into the light, we see that they are not absolute truths, but simply echoes of the past, waiting to be questioned, to be softened, to be rewritten. And this is part of the beautiful gift that lives within the shadow, not only the hidden parts of the self, but the quiet opportunity to change, to grow, to gently step into a new way of being that feels more true, more whole, more peaceful. Imagine now, standing at the edge of a calm, quiet lake, the water smooth and reflective like glass, and as you look into the reflection, you see not only your face, but also the shadows, the forgotten stories, the hidden beliefs that have shaped your journey, and with soft curiosity, you begin to question them, to release what no longer serves you, to reclaim the beautiful, authentic self that has always been there, quietly waiting beneath the surface. Jung often reminded us that the unconscious, where the shadow lives, is not fixed in stone. It is alive, responsive, ready to change when we meet it with awareness, with honesty, with compassion. And so, each time we turn toward the shadow, each time we question an old belief, each time we soften a hidden fear, we shift the landscape of the self, creating more space for truth, for peace, for quiet wholeness. And as you drift softly into this reflection, remember that meeting the shadow is not about blame or regret. It is about understanding, about offering yourself the gentle gift of awareness, and with that awareness, the freedom to live not from old, hidden stories, but from the quiet, beautiful truth of who you really are. So breathe softly now, resting in this peaceful space, knowing that with each gentle step toward your shadow, you are not losing yourself. You are finding yourself piece by piece, moment by moment, quietly, returning home to the whole complex, beautiful being you were always meant to be. As we drift along this gentle path, let us pause for a moment to remember that the shadow does not only live quietly in our individual hearts and minds, it stretches beyond us, woven softly into the very fabric of human history. Because the struggles, the fears, the hidden parts of the self that we carry, they are not new. They are as old as time, passed down from generation to generation, whispered through stories, hidden in traditions, reflected in myths and legends that speak quietly of the human soul. Carl Jung often explored the idea of the collective unconscious, a vast hidden realm beneath our awareness, shared by all of humanity, carrying the ancient symbols, fears, and archetypes that shape not only our personal lives, but the world itself, and within this collective space lives the collective. Shadow, the forgotten histories, the silenced truths, the hidden fears of entire cultures, communities, and generations. When we look at history, we can see the shadow playing its quiet role in the cycles of conflict, in the exclusion of those who are different, in the fear of the unknown, in the resistance to change. And just as the personal shadow shapes our individual lives, the collective shadow shapes societies, quietly influencing the choices we make, the way we treat one another, the fears we pass down to our children. But here too, there is hope, because just as facing our personal shadow brings growth, awareness, and healing, facing the collective shadow offers us the opportunity to create a more compassionate, conscious world, a world where we do not deny the mistakes of the past, but learn from them, where we do not reject what is different, but embrace it, where we do not hide our fears, but understand them, and in doing so, loosen their quiet grip on our lives. Imagine now, standing at the edge of a vast forest, ancient and deep, stretching far beyond what the eye can see, and within that forest live the forgotten stories of humanity, the old wounds, the hidden fears, the silenced voices, but also, hidden among the shadows, there are seeds of understanding, of peace, of quiet hope, waiting patiently to grow. And though it may feel overwhelming to face the collective shadow, remember that change always begins within, with one gentle step, with one honest reflection, with one act of quiet awareness, because as each person meets their own shadow, they contribute to a world that is a little more conscious, a little more compassionate, a little more whole. Jung taught us that wholeness is not only a personal journey, it is a shared one woven softly through the relationships. We build the communities, we create the stories we tell in the future. We shape together, and though the collective shadow may seem vast, it is softened each time we choose curiosity over fear, understanding over judgment, love over rejection. So, as you rest here, breathing softly, drifting deeper into this gentle reflection, know that your quiet work of self-awareness is never wasted. That each moment you meet your shadow with compassion ripples outward, touching the world in ways you may never fully see, but that matter all the same. And in this quiet knowing, there is peace, there is strength, and there is hope for yourself, for others, and for the beautiful, complex world we share. As we drift quietly through these deeper reflections, you may begin to sense that the shadow is not only a hidden part of the self, but also a quiet protector in its own way, because though the shadow holds our fears, our forgotten pain, and the traits we were taught to hide, it also formed to protect us, to shield the tender, vulnerable parts of our being that the world may not have been ready to hold with care. Carl Jung often spoke of how the shadow is not born from weakness, but from necessity, from the quiet, unconscious need to keep ourselves safe when we were too young, too unsure or too unprepared to process the full complexity of life. And though the shadow may seem heavy now, it began as a form of protection, a quiet wall built around the parts of us that felt unsafe to express. Perhaps there was a time when your sensitivity was misunderstood, when your boldness was discouraged, when your quiet dreams were dismissed, and in those moments, without realizing it, you tucked those parts away, hidden behind the walls of the shadow, keeping them safe until you were ready, truly ready to welcome them back into the light. And this is why meeting the shadow requires softness, patience, and compassion, because we are not simply confronting what has been hidden, we are unwrapping the protective layers that once served us, thanking them gently, and inviting those forgotten parts of ourselves to breathe again, to exist without fear, to belong once more. Imagine now walking through that hidden forest of the self where the trees grow tall, the shadows stretch softly across the path, and the air is quiet, still, and safe, and as you walk, you come upon an old, forgotten gate covered in vines and thyme, and beyond the gate lies the hidden garden, the place where your forgotten strengths, your silenced dreams, your hidden truths wait patiently. You approach with care, with softness, understanding that what lives beyond the gate is not frightening, but simply fragile, in need of warmth, of patience, of gentle understanding. And as you open the gate, you do so not with force, but with love, with curiosity, with quiet respect for the journey that brought you here. And in doing so, you remind yourself that there is no shame in having hidden parts, no weakness in carrying a shadow, because the shadow, formed not to punish you but to protect you, to keep your tender self safe until the day you felt ready to return, to remember, to reclaim. Jung believed that the journey of individuation, of becoming whole, is not a battle to conquer the shadow, but a quiet process of integration, of weaving together the hidden and the visible, the vulnerable and the strong, the forgotten and the known, into a single, beautiful, complex self. And so, as you breathe softly now, resting in this peaceful space, allow yourself to release the old fear of the shadow, to see it for what it truly is, a quiet protector, a hidden companion, a part of you that has waited patiently, gently, for this moment of remembrance, of understanding, of homecoming. Because when you meet the shadow with compassion, when you unwrap its quiet layers, you do not lose yourself, you reclaim yourself fully, beautifully, and completely. As this gentle journey continues, you may begin to notice how the deeper we wander into the quiet landscape of the shadow, the more familiar it becomes, because though it may have once felt hidden, distant, or even unsettling, with time, with softness, with patience, the shadow begins to feel less like a stranger and more like an old forgotten friend, quietly waiting to be seen, to be understood, to be welcomed home. Carl Jung often described this process of meeting the shadow as a journey toward wholeness, not a battle to be won, not a struggle to overcome, but a quiet, unfolding process of remembrance where the pieces of the self, once scattered, hidden, or rejected, slowly return, fitting gently back into place, creating a sense of inner peace, of quiet belonging, of true, lasting understanding. And there is no need to rush this process. No need to force the hidden parts into the light before they are ready, because like the changing of the seasons or the gentle growth of roots beneath the earth, this journey unfolds in its own time, guided by your inner wisdom, your quiet awareness, and your growing compassion for yourself. Imagine once more walking through the forest of the self, the trees tall and ancient, the earth soft beneath your feet, the air cool and calm. And beside you walks the shadow, no longer a frightening figure hidden in the darkness, but a quiet companion, carrying the forgotten parts of your story, the hidden strengths, the silent dreams, the pieces of yourself that once felt lost. With each step, the fear softens, the distance closes, and the shadow becomes simply another part of you, not something to reject, but something to integrate, to accept, to love, and in doing so, you begin to walk more fully, more confidently, more peacefully through the world. Jung understood that when we embrace the shadow, we do not lose our light, we strengthen it, because true light is not the absence of darkness, but the quiet courage to hold both, to live with complexity, to walk with depth, to exist fully as the beautifully layered, endlessly human beings we are. And as you breathe gently now, resting in this space of reflection, you may begin to sense that the journey with the shadow does not end here. It continues quietly, softly, woven into the moments of daily life, in the conversations you have, in the emotions you feel, in the dreams that visit you at night, always offering gentle invitations to look inward, to soften your gaze, to remember what has been hidden, to reclaim what has been lost. Because the shadow is not the end of the journey, it is the beginning of wholeness, of understanding, of quiet, beautiful peace. And so, as you rest here, allow yourself to feel that peace gently settling within you, knowing that each moment of reflection, each quiet step inward, brings you closer to your true self. Not only the parts you show the world, but all of you, hidden and visible, light and shadow woven together into the full, complex, endlessly worthy being that you are. And now, as this quiet journey draws to a gentle close, you may begin to notice how different this space feels, softer, calmer, more familiar, because in these quiet reflections we have wandered through the hidden places of the self, through the shadowed forests of memory, through the forgotten corners of the mind, and we have not run from what we found there. We have simply observed, listened, and allowed ourselves to remember that even the hidden parts belong. Carl Jung taught us that the journey to the shadow is not about becoming someone new, but about remembering who we've always been beneath the layers of fear, beneath the masks we wear for the world, beneath the old stories that told us to hide, to shrink, to forget. And in remembering, we soften, we expand, we come home to the quiet, beautiful truth of our wholeness. And the shadow, once seen as a source of fear, becomes instead a quiet companion, a keeper of forgotten stories, of hidden gifts, of gentle strength that was always there, waiting patiently for the moment we felt safe enough, ready enough to welcome it home. The shadow holds not only the wounds, but the wisdom, the parts of ourselves that knew how to survive, how to protect, how to shield what was tender. And though those protections may no longer be needed in the same way, we can still thank them, honor them, gently release them, and in doing so, create space for something new, for peace, for understanding, for quiet, beautiful transformation. And so, as you breathe softly now, resting in this space of stillness, know that there is no final destination to reach, no perfect version of yourself to chase. There is only the quiet, unfolding process of becoming, of remembering, of returning to yourself fully, gently, completely. Some days, the shadow may feel close, whispering its old fears, stirring forgotten doubts, and that is all right, because now you know how to meet it with patience, with compassion, with the quiet knowing that it is simply a part of you. Not an enemy, not a flaw, but a hidden thread in the tapestry of your being. Other days, the shadow may rest quietly in the background, its presence gentle, its lessons softly integrated into the way. You walk the way you speak, the way you see yourself and others, with more understanding, more softness, more peace. And in time, you will see that this work, this quiet, beautiful journey inward, is not only for yourself, but for the world around you, because as you meet your own shadow with compassion, you create space to meet the hidden parts of others with the same grace, softening judgment, opening understanding, building bridges where walls once stood. And in this, the world becomes a little gentler, a little safer, a little more whole, not through force, but through the quiet, rippling effect of awareness, of compassion, of shared humanity. So, as you rest now, breathing deeply, gently, calmly, carry this quiet understanding with you, that within you lives everything you need to meet the shadow, to embrace the light, to walk gently, beautifully as the whole worthy, complex human being that you are. And remember, you are not broken, you are not incomplete, you have simply been waiting to come home to yourself, and now with patience, with love, with quiet courage, you have begun that journey, and the shadow, far from something to fear, walks beside you as a guide, as a reminder, as a quiet key to the beautiful, complex wholeness that has always been yours.